Hello, Nush and Eric. I wanted to give you guys a little description of how I came to understand college student affairs or the student services perspective related to student development theory. It kind of invades and integrates my entire perspective. And at some point, I had developed this presentation to give offer to some students that were in a master's program. But it kind of, it has about 4 slides. It goes through a little bit of my background and um, how I had a chance to attend uh, community college after being at a university and settled in or my bachelor's in psychology from Azusa Pacific University, as well as a master's degree of education in college student affairs. And it really focused on student leadership and how to help someone um, uh, develop a better sense of their passions and desire for vocation in particular areas. I used to live with students and kind of saw them go through their process. I call the residence halls kind of the living laboratory, and seeing people transition to apartment style living areas. And, I went on to Occidental College and opened up their residence halls and apartment living areas. And, you know, had a chance to transition into career development where I was the assistant director um, after working as an area coordinator for a few years. Um, I moved on to UC Irvine and continued working in a um, residential living capacity. We have a lot of extracurricular, what we call co-curricular instruction that goes on in the residence halls. And while I was at Occidental, I applied for a part-time position at Pasadena, and that's sort of how I transitioned to the community college. The university setting, students were beginning to have what I called a consumeristic um, sort of perspective. Um, they were demanding certain grades based on the amount of money they were paying for their education. And there was this sense in which they were expecting faculty to give them what they wanted. And I wanted to work with a population of students that was trying to grow and um, reach higher heights, but that maybe hadn't had some things handed to them on a platter, a golden platter, so to speak. Um, and that's how I found my way to the community college. Down in the right corner, you can see I worked at a variety of community colleges as an adjunct, um, and few full-time positions, temporary full-time positions, and each offered a different lens to the populations of students that I work with. Um, but I'm very appreciative to each experience because it really helped to shape my perspective towards what we're doing with Stargate. So for me, it kind of centers or helping students centers around a couple of questions related to their development of why they're in college and what they're looking to get out of it. And it kind of deals with this component of purpose and function, answering the question of who am I and what am I going to do about it once you find out what that information is. And who am I deals with, components of character and how you make ethical decisions, leadership, and uh, it ties to who you see yourself in the type of environment that you want to be in one day. Um, so ultimately, my goal was to help students develop a plan of attack as it related to uh, kind of a seek and search and destroy methodology for figuring out how to become what they were looking for in the marketplace. Um, so, you know, I like to focus on helping to design programs that sort of heighten core task competence, core task completion. Um, so in this presentation, I was telling future student affairs workers that it's important to develop programs that allow students to achieve a certain competence um, as they fulfill certain tasks on their journey. So when you think about the idea of the academic milestones and the career milestones, for me, it is a component of a person's development, um, sort of a lifespan development uh, um sort of marker or a strategy. And I'm going to expound on that a little bit further in the next slide when you see sort of the array of student development theories that I've kind of subscribed to as it relates to working with uh, traditional age learners as well as non-traditional age learners. Um, and in the community colleges, um, student services is sort of the area in which student development is sort of played out. Um, and it's done so through the Student Success and Support Program, what we call Triple SP. And um, the Student Success Act, Seymour Campbell Student Success Act of 2012, ushered in a new reality of the focus of how community colleges were going to serve people. And in essence, um, it it basically said that we're here to help people reach their goals through academic and career programs, but in relation to the local job market opportunities that exist. And that was sort of the first time that I had read where the community college was sort of shifting its focus towards not only letting people say they're interested in transfer, but it had to have been earning your degree or whatever your ultimate goal was had to be have been seen within the context of the greater labor market. So this was a shift. And after the student success scorecard, excuse me, the student success factors that led to the Student Success Act, you had um, the strong workforce program that came into creation, building off those initial concepts. So these are the primary components that comprise the Student Success and Support Program. And student development theory sort of undergirds each one of these steps, each one of these processes. And I want you to see a little bit more specifically what that means. So there are a host of student development theories that sort of um, people subscribe to, stage theorists, and you have transition theorists, some people that focus on career and workforce related theories. And many of these theories drive a lot of the websites that we utilize, such as um, ONET Online, um, the whole concept of the RIASEC model. Is John Holland's theory. It's a typology model. So these are some of my core um, sort of student development theories that I've sort of subscribed to. And the first one, the theory of identity development by Chickering and Reiser, it's a stage theory of development, and it highlights um, sort of this idea through the core task of movement through these seven vectors. And a lot of this research originally occurred while observing people in the living laboratory of the residence halls and sort of seeing people outside of the home for the first time. So over the years, in addition to traditional psychological theories, um, other components of stage development, cognitive development theories were developed through the observation of humans in their day-to-day activities. So for me, this concept of developing purpose in that first row is very critical in terms of helping people come to a sense of of confidence and competence, and it results in the practical example of something like helping people identify a major and a potential career. Then you have transition theory, proposed by Schlossberg, and she focused on transitions that adults make throughout their lives, how they cope and adjust to different situations that come up in their lives. And you can see some of the core task elements. Um, Sort of her key terminology is this idea of moving in, moving through, and moving on. So you might say moving into a program, moving through it, and then moving on, from not getting stuck, trying to help people work through various barriers, etc. And you see a practical example of reentry student services that are sort of offered to those who are coming back to school because over the years we kind of have come to terms with knowing what people need, or being able to sort of be proactive and plan the basic necessities of what we think they need. um, Typology theories. John Holland's theory is the core career theory that really drives environment and satisfaction. So, this sense of looking at the individual differences between people and why someone might find one work environment satisfying in contrast to someone with a different type of proclivities that wants to work with information or data, um, and this collection of um letters in the reset code that really defines all of the different career types. This is one of the most, probably the most prominent career theories that's used today, and drives a lot of um, the different career websites. It's not really a developmental theory. It's more about observing people in their environment and asking questions as to why they're satisfied with being in that environment. So that's sort of the core task for them, is to match interests um, with a satisfying environment. So I use the example of, there are some people who are passionate about helping other people, but then at the same time, you might be passionate, have a strong desire to make money, and these two interests come in conflict with one another, and you have students who get stuck in their career exploration process because they can't work through that dynamic. It's hard for them to see the progression from one career opportunity to the next. So that's just a kind of an example of how you can have uh, some difficulties within that type of decision making. Involvement theory is a student affairs theory that um, proposed by Alexander Aston. And the basic tenet, if you think about anyone making their way to a university for the first time, it's the idea of students being engaged in their environment. That the more engaged you are, um, your growth and learning is heightened, because you're getting involved, you're feeling a sense of belonging, and the quality and quantity of your student involvement heightens your experience. So the likelihood that you're going to um, persist and complete is higher. So you see opportunities for people to get involved in learning communities, learning clusters, and things like student government. Um, these are all key components. Building leadership skills, um, that focus on that developmental component of involvement. Retention theory, a gentleman by the name of Tento. Um, the idea that student attrition occurs because of a feeling of isolation. So people leave colleges because they haven't made meaningful connections, and they have difficulty adjusting to a new environment. So the core task there is social integration and campus engagement. Once again, so you see some of the practical examples. You may also get a sense of why I I focus on this idea of getting involved in these engagement